We are so totally out of touch with the history and tradition that somehow we think the wine today is what was drunk by the French.
That is a misunderstood for the whole population, the whole society.
I've got an unbelievable knowledge of the history and traditions and culture, gastronomy around the world. And I knew in my heart of hearts, something was really wrong with this whole wine and food pairing thing. We made all this crap up. And it's one of the worst marketing and sales initiative strategies that could ever have been instituted. Bad for business. Anyway,
We have absolutely nowhere to go if we don't innovate the industries.
how is quality defined at this level or over here? So many things that are just these unending blah, 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 that don't allow the creation of actionable strategies to actually solve problems. So we're using all these metaphors and all this BS. We don't even know it ourselves because our lack of critical thinking. And then we can't understand why consumers, why don't they get it? And it's because we're talking to ourselves.
We actually live like a bubble, right? Hi guys, and one more podcast with Vino Visionaries, and today I have a team. Thank you so much, team, to be accepting this invitation to be part of the Vino Visionaries. For me, you are a visionary because you're doing some completely different things. Okay, probably most of the industry is gonna tell you that's not right, and I guess it's about that, the visionary. To know all the beginning when you start is very hard because you see things much more ahead of most of people, and it's very interesting because you are master of wine, where being learning all the very like the limit is of in the wine industry, and then we're very interested to know how you break them, how you break the rules. So how was your experience?
Well, a lot of it is also where did the rules come from? That's a big part of my background, and also in being one of the old guys in the industry now. It provides a lot of perspectives about what's going on today in the wine industry, in the education, sort of the standard operating procedures that have been adopted around wine, and how much of what we say, oh, this is a traditional thing, or this is classical and whatever, and when things aren't.
And then how you notice, how crossing your mind, like someone told you, you're reading the book, how is actually was the transformation? Because like was like that. I was for 12 years thinking the wine industry is like this because that's what we've been told about, and we live in this wine bubble where everyone live and talk about the same things. We just think the same, but you were on that bubble first, and you get out of the bubble. How was that? How was what's happened there?
Well, it kind of going back to the beginning, I guess. I've been learning about wine since 1966. Yeah,
We don't need. Yeah.
so
I wasn't even born in that time.
I know. Most people weren't. So I'm 72 now. So I started in this when I was 14 years old, and I was growing up in Miami, Florida. My dad was the administrative director of the Medical Association in Miami, and so a lot of entertaining. We got to go to all these great hotels on Miami Beach, and um, uh, and my dad was particularly fond of Burgundy wines. He was a member of the Chaîne de Rôtisseurs, and right there, that's actually his Chaîne de Rôtisseurs certificate from 1967, and mine's over there on the other wall from years later. But wine just, I don't know. I've got some learning disabilities. I've got ADHD and I've got dyslexia. And so I didn't do well in school, but I was really good at mischief. And so for some reason, I started reading wine books. I've got, this is my Bible. It's called
Wow.
Larousse Gastronomique. And it was written in 1938.
Wow.
But this is called the Crown Edition. It was translated into English in 1961. And for some, it's also a sort of an encyclopedia form. So you can jump around from topic to topic and look things up and whatever. And with my crazy brain, that works out great for me. And my primary interest was wine, but reading the books and learning more about wine. Of course, you learn about the gastronomy and cuisine and those kind of things. So I started cooking pretty intently when I was 15. And back in the 60s, it wasn't hip or cool like it is now, to be a chef or whatever. and I just was fascinated. I loved the history. I loved the stories. I loved every part about it. I love to eat and I love to drink. So when I dropped out of college in 1972 to work at a place called Burns Steakhouse, which a lot of people may be familiar with. It's the largest wine list in the world. Back in
Wow.
60, they were doing organic farming. They were doing an incredible recycling program of everything from fat that went to soap makers to their own organic garden and whatever. And so I decided I was too young to get a job in the wine business. So I worked as a professional chef for 10 years. I did my apprenticeships starting at Burns Steakhouse, and I went back to Miami for my pastry apprenticeship, because in classic cuisine, a great chef has to have a strong basis in pastries. And then did my sauce apprenticeship, et cetera, and then became an executive chef. And
Wow.
and for most of the restaurants that I worked with, I also would do the wine selections. So that kind of kept my hand in things.
So the chef is actually was doing the wine selection on the restaurants back then.
What's that?
The chefs, actually the executive chefs.
No, that was not common at all. Chefs, almost all chefs that I ever worked with, and some very great chefs, almost knew nothing about wine. So things are very different today, with chefs and sommeliers working together and the whole wine and food pairing. And we'll get to the whole wine and food pairing thing, but and it's very important to understand. I've got a very traditional and very European-centric basis of knowledge of French cuisine, traditions, culture, gastronomy, and of course the wines. And then I was working with a gentleman who I met in a restaurant in Miami, and his family owned 10 Chinese restaurants in Atlanta, and his dad had a massive heart attack. So he asked me if I would move to Atlanta to be the chef of the Chinese restaurants. So I did that, and I can actually operate a 3-wok professional Chinese station, and worked as a chef in Chinese kitchen for a period of time, which is really great because my dad always loved Chinese food, and my birthday would always be the Chinese New Year banquet because my birthday's in February.
Yeah.
So one day in Atlanta, I was in a wine store. I was in my chef, pants and just a t-shirt, and I was looking at a wine selection. I helped a lady pick out some wines. This guy came out and says, he looked in the basket, he goes, oh, those are great selections. He goes, you want a job?
So he offered you a job and just to
Yeah.
you didn't do any like Wesset course or anything like this.
Well, I had to go through interviews and everything else, but he was a wine manager for a store, and this always brings a smile. The name of the store was Happy Herman's, and it's an institution in Atlanta, or used to be an institution in Atlanta. They had great wine selection. The only place you could get gourmet chocolates and a fabulous range of cheeses, 50 single bean coffees and stuff like that. And so I thought, well, that'd be kind of cool. That's where I want to be anyways. And so they were opening a new store. So I was hired to be the wine manager of the new store. And I was just in hog heaven. I had so much fun. I got to stock this entire store, and we still had the gourmet groceries and the full service deli and the cheeses and pâtés and all that kind of stuff, and beer and wine and liquor. And so over the years, we started importing and bringing in wines that had never been available in Atlanta. We were buying containers of rare wines. It was when the dollar was really strong in the early 80s. And it was also an introduction where I got to meet people in the wine industry and just fell in love with so many of the people that I met and had such an honor to meet. So during that period, we also built a very robust international rare wine business. So people would turn to Happy Herman's for vintage ports and Bordeaux's and wines back into the 19th century and all this kind of stuff. And of course, the tastings, and I ran wine education programs. Welcome to 8 weeks on wine. And back then, it was really kind of funny. The first week would be about how wine is made and wine tasting. Then you would have 2 weeks on the wines of France, a week on the wines of Italy. Then you would lump together Germany and Spain. And then there were some other crazy countries where everybody knew wine really couldn't be made, like the US and Australia and stuff like that. So I did that for a long time. And then conducting tastings, doing special dinners, that kind of stuff. It was a blast.
You had so much fun, didn't you?
Oh my God, it really was. Some of the most fun days of my life, for sure. And then in 1988, I'd been receiving an invitation from Beringer Vineyards, it's actually Beringer Wine Estates, which is now Treasury Wine Estates. And Beringer was kind of the halo. They wanted me to come out and be their director of communications. So it was interesting because when I started at Happy Herman's, the quality of Beringer was really iffy, but on this ascending path that was really remarkable. And so they had been offering me a job for about 2 years. In 1988, the wines are becoming spectacular. I'd met Myron Nightingale, who was the founding winemaker, and Ed Sabraja. And so I said, yep, all right, I'm coming to California. So I moved to Napa Valley in 1988. And again, now I'm really in the wine business, right? So another thing was happening in 1988. The Institute of Masters of Wine started the internationalization of the program, of the examination, and of the credential. Up until 1988, you really had to work in the UK wine trade
To be
because
able to master.
yeah, and one of the clarifications for everybody, the master sommelier credential is for the hospitality related applications in business and so forth. The master of wine is more about the international trade, the business end of things, and in the science end. So in 1988, Michael Hill-Smith from Australia became the first non-UK resident to pass the exam. And I sent in an application and said, hey, pick me.
But did you need to go in the process we're doing today? Like the process we do today is the West, like the WSET 1, 2, 3, 4 to be able to apply for Master of Wine. Back then was the same or not really?
And I may be wrong about this, but I still think you can be accepted with work experience in lieu of the WSET.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And what's fascinating about what was going on in 1988, there was no study course. The examination was only done in London.
Oh, yeah.
And remember, this is before you were born and before the internet was born and so forth.
34 years ago, 35 years ago.
I know. I'm so old. So I.
Wow.
So I had to submit a dissertation. I still have a copy of it. Winemaking, art or science? ? And you had to write 5,000 words and present that. And so I did, and they accepted that. They said, "Jolly good, come." And then I had to go participate in a blind tasting. That was done in Gonzales, California, in the Central Valley. And I muddled my way through that. So 1989, 6 Americans, one of which had sat the examination in 88 and failed. But in 1989, there were 6 Americans that went over to sit the Master of Wine examination, and I was one of them. I'd never seen a question. I didn't know the protocol for the tasting. I had no clue what I was doing. And
Wow.
yeah, and it was intimidating. When they started the invigilator, we're on the 32nd floor of the New Zealand building, overlooking Trafalgar Square, windows all the way around. And the invigilator said, "You may now turn over your papers and begin." And my hand was just shaking. So I'm like, "Okay, well, when you're ready, we can start writing." And of course, with my ADHD, oh, I know, I was terrified. And then to make things worse, as soon as I start writing, I hear this, and I look over. We're on the 32nd floor, and a window washer is on the windows and proceeds to wash the windows for the next 3 hours all around the room. So the exam's 4 days, and about 100 pages of theory, technical questions, and then 3 days, 3 sessions of blind tastings over the 4 days, 12 wines in each session. So I went home and I got my results, and I was one of the most epic failures in the history of the Master of Wine examinations. And I'm serious about that. The chairman, after I passed, the chairman used to introduce me, Mr. Hanni, I did so poorly on his first try at the examination. I was trying to find a polite way to say, stay away for a very long time. So, all right. So now we'll actually get to something towards the question you were asking. I got back to Napa, and I had my administrative assistant research some writing classes. I need to be able to outline. I need to be able to do this because of my learning disabilities. I just suck at organization and writing. Right now I don't read a book a year. I'm almost incapable of reading a book. So that's how screwy
Very
this is.
interesting. Then you
Yeah.
mentioned it like for you was even more challenge to actually making these exams because you have all those other things like against you. Like,
Yeah,
the-
it was kind of like a third grader trying to sit the Master of Wine exam. So so I signed up for a course, and I went to it. It was a 3-day writing course, and I go to the conference room, and there's a registration table, and the sign says uh, critical thinking and disruptive innovation for electrical engineers.
well,
I said, excuse me? I, I said, I, I said, I said, I signed up for this course. And the lady looks at it and she goes, you moron, that was last weekend in San Jose. Oh, crap. I said, well,
so
what's this?
so
And
you
she
did
says,
the wrong
well, this is for people, a very high level of electrical engineering and how to improve communications, how to improve products by understanding how better to communicate and understand consumer needs and whatever. I said, well, what the hell? I paid for it. So I spent
That's
3 days. It changed my life, Priscilla. It rocked my world. If I had not accidentally gone to that course, I never would have passed the Master of Wine examination. And I'd probably still be doing the same old crap and thinking the same old way that I always thought. And so what happened in the 3 days, uh, one of their key premises was that as people become really expert in a field, they start to speak what's called a focal vocabulary.
Mhm.
And if you're working within a group, you have certain agreements on what words mean and standards of measurement and protocols and this kind of stuff. But then when you work outside of your team, and certainly when you get to consumers, you're almost incapable of communicating. So,
And that's what you see in the wine industry as well. So I think in all
well, and
industries, the wine industry is just such a big
yeah,
problem.
and so I was just blown away by the content. They also taught something called mind mapping, how to organize your thoughts and whatever, not in the linear kind of outline that most people can do pretty regularly. And there's a lot of people, there's millions of people whose brains work like my brain works, which is also, of course, we'll get to a key part of my research and what I'm trying to accomplish with the wine industry. But mind mapping lets somebody who has random thoughts uh, just write down what that thought is, and then later you connect everything. And it was so cool. I'd never experienced anything like that, and then I introduced that later to the Masters of Wine Study program and whatever. So long and short of it was that through this, critical thinking is the ability um, to take a topic or an issue or a project or whatever, find uh, differing opinions and try then to understand the basis for those opinions. What's the data that supports this, or what created the point of view that this is how we should match wine and food, or that this is good wine and this is bad wine. Now, of course, this was all with electrical engineering stuff, but there were 80 electrical engineers and one wine geek, me. Uh, and we were doing all these exercises, and everybody wanted me on their team because I was the wine guy. So that was a lot of fun. All right. So 1990, I went over, sat the examination, thought I had failed it again. And then in July of 1990, the exams, it used to be the first week of May, and then you'd get your results about the last 2 weeks of July sometime for the
Okay.
examination. Yeah, so it's a long process. And so I was working down at Meridian Vineyards with the Behringer team. We just purchased a big vineyard, and I got the news, hey, you passed the Master of Wine. I actually was told by Joel Butler, who was the other American, and he and I were the first two Americans, or first people from this hemisphere to pass the examination. So they're very proud of it.
It was very hard, and even back then, it was absolutely so hard to make it. So you need to attempt it more than once. Because today it's a very hard to still. The exam is probably one of the hardest to exam in the world. Like for
the pass rate is still, a lot more people are taking it, but the pass rate is still only about 8%.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
very low.
Which is kind of in my point of view, it's an indictment about the wine industry and the wine education system. So we don't, what's required to pass a Master of Wine examination, number one, you have to have the understanding of viticulture and enology, but also of the business end of thing, the supply and demand, and the quality and value chain, the supply chain, regulations and laws, distribution systems, and so forth. And that's where an awful lot of people are lacking. They don't understand the fundamentals of the wine business. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's one of my big components of what I do today. I've got a company called winebusinesseducation.com, and we offer online structured courses. And then I teach at Washington State University and Linfield University and whatever.
So just to make sure people have this lack of, on the business to be able to pass on these exams, and to be able to even expand the knowledge, I guess, as well. Yeah. Because I think we are very limited, and what we need now is just expand the knowledge more and more. And we need to learn even more and be open-minded to learn as well. If you think
open-minded, that's where the critical thinking comes in. What does this word mean? How is quality defined, at this level or over here? So many things that are just these unending blah, 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 that don't allow the creation of actionable strategies to actually solve problems. And there's just all this lingering BS, just the simplest things that the wine industry, because of the bubble that we're in, we don't know that when we say a dry wine, that it's actually a contronym. A contronym is a usage of a word that is the actual opposite of what the standard usage of the word is.
Yeah. It's funny because because I work so much face to face with consumers, and I haven't paid attention what's the questions and how the interpretations of consumers gets completely different what we think. And when the customers coming to me and they say want a dry wine, not always he talking about the sweetness. Sometimes he just wanted that to know that tannins, like that dry sensations when you make in the mouth. That's for them is to dry. Oh, like when they want a sweet wine. It's not necessarily they want to wine with sugar. Sometimes it just means like he want more fruity wines. It's very interesting because you almost needed to make it more question to understand the interpretation of the person. Sometimes I have customers say like, I want a sparkling wine, but some wines can be very bubble. I don't like that. So the very bubble he described is just because he doesn't like the shama wine. He wanted just like the bubble's a little bit more fine. That's feel like less aggressive for his palate. So it's very interesting, like how we have a way to understand the wine, but the consumers they don't have the same language, and I found like it lost in the beginning because when they tell me and describe the wine in the way, it's like, well, and then we always like have to learn their vocabulary to be able to interpret it what they want, to be able to give the best option for them. And it was a process of experience. And you're right, like you dry sweet, it's very confusing, and then for the consumer side, I don't know if they think sweet as a sugar. Sometimes they think sweet as a fruity, like something like a sweet fruit, like a strawberry, but like sweet, not sweet strawberries, not the sour
Yeah, so
strawberries. It's very
this is
difficult.
the kind of hole we keep digging, and this is all part of the perception project, which that's my new book, and the organization and are working together and rethinking the wine industry, and sort of jumping ahead into the perceptual sciences and so on. We to this day continue to collapse taste and smell. You hear people talk of most of taste is really smell and blah blah. No, it's not. They are.
We should tell people the experience you did with me, because now everywhere I go, I make the same experience and people love it.
I'm going to let you tell the experience actually, but the simplicity is because of the mess we've made with wine and education and pseudoscience and our lack of critical thinking. All right, and this is what it real boils down to. Is stopping to say, well, this is a chronic problem. Just a simple thing like dry wine. Wine is wet. How is it dry? But that's what a acronym is.
Yes.
And if you ever get a heavy wine, you serve a heavy wine with a heavy dish. Well, if you take a heavy Cabernet or Bordeaux or whatever, or Shiraz, pour it gently into some Moscato, and the red wine will float. So technically, the Moscato is heavier. It weighs more. It literally weighs more. And that's what the word heavy means. So we're using all these metaphors and all this BS. We don't even know it ourselves because our lack of critical thinking. And then we can't understand why consumers, why don't they get it? And it's because we're talking to ourselves. And this is exactly what my experience, that my conference with the electrical engineers was about. We're talking to ourselves with no clue of what it's going to take. And it's so simple to be able to say, oh, all right, so the difference between sweet and fruity, sweet is a primary taste, and it's primary taste. So when you have sweetness, even if your nose is closed, you'll get the sweetness, all right?
Yeah.
And fruity is an aromatic. It is a smell.
Nothing to do with the tasty.
With taste. And so a wine can smell like fruit, but not be sweet.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And then if it's got the skins and so on, tannin is what makes leather when you tan leather, all right, tan the hide to make leather, and it creates friction in your mouth. And that's not a taste or a smell, that's a touch sensation. And the confusing part is that it would, most people describe, it dried my mouth out. But so so there's actually ways that we could adopt as industry standards, but
Mm.
everybody's too busy with their terroir and their BS and their
Yeah.
you know?
I guess I understand the society quite like this, and you correct me if you think different. I'm happy to take your idea to this podcast so people have like a critical rethinking. Um, we actually live like a bubble, right? So we are doing the same things. We're going to work, spend 80 hours work, get home very, very tired, and I have kids, have TV, have dinner, and then we don't really have time to think. And the next day we just do the same thing again. The next
Yeah.
day we do the same thing again. And next day we do the same thing again. And then we just became clones. We all the same, doing the same thing, working all 80, 90 hours a day, get tired, watch TV, have a dinner with family, going to sleep, and then, we don't take a time to think. We don't take a time to ask ourselves why I'm doing this. When you ask ourselves, like, why I believe the dry is actually dry and the wine industry perception. Even though when you talk with consumers and consumers tell you they are confusing, we don't really try to understand why the confusion come from, why the
Right.
perception of people is so different, because we're just so busy with all bubbles set up. And then that is why I like you so much, and I like your content, I like your book, and I like how you put yourself in there, because you challenge lots of people to rethinking. And it can be very challenging for people doing that, because we are such a small group doing this. And then sometimes we feel like we don't know if you can accept you or not. We always that fear to be accepted, to be like about people. That's normal from the humans. And then even the people who ask it themselves, they don't go ahead with that, because then have a fear of people what's gonna look like. It's very hard to be a lion if everyone is look like a zebra. Like if everyone look like a zebra, you want it to be a lion, so you're gonna feel like a fear, because you're gonna be different. And then that is why my thinking about rethinking, and this is why I wanted to support you somehow, because I think we needed to accept it. We have different perceptions. It's okay to be different. It's okay to like
It's not
something different.
only okay, it's inevitable. And
Yeah,
even
and
when we think we're exactly like somebody or whatever, we might be in actual complete disagreement because of our perceptual differences and not even know it. So we're agreeing on something that we don't agree on.
and that is, I think, that's what we wanted to try to let people say. Like it's not just okay, like you said. It's actually we need it. What
Yeah,
do we need the industry? It's actually people thinking different, creating different things, because we are such have so many different segments. And then that's exactly what phenotype it's about it. To understand the different groups of people, because they're not all the same. And that's the thing. What's hurt me the most, we when in the my system of education, and how I was thinking, because I was in the bubble for 12 years, and then I was thinking everyone like the same things. All the quality wine should be this, and all we need to focus on this, and that's how we have to communicate. We have to communicate all the same. But you don't understand. We are not on a society with like everyone is the same. Everyone are the same. Like it's the same people. So it just doesn't make sense. There's a disconnection there.
right.
And then probably that's something I wanted to talk to you about it, because you have done this research about 30 years, and you discovered such a different segments. And then we all talking about the same segments, like the higher quality wines, all the Dom Perignon, all the very expensive brands, and blah blah blah. And you forget like the other people, they may never gonna like it, this type of wines, because they have a different, taste. And
Yeah.
that's okay. That's okay. That's crucial. So that's how we can make it like a more engaging, I guess, industry.
Well, and to do that, okay, so so remember the seminar I went to was critical thinking and disruptive innovation, right? Now, the word disruptive triggers people sometimes, and it's going to get worse because what they pointed out in this course is if I'm working with a group of engineers, if there's a group of sommeliers, if there's all sorts of different collectives, let's say, uh, the it humans form collectives and operate under what are called collective delusions. And those delusions are we're right, everybody else is wrong. It's also how things work, though. A collective. So I'm actually shifting the words that I learned, which was collective delusions, but to collective agreements. All right. So when you're part of the collective, it kind of gives you a juice, a social connection, all sorts of positive aspects of belonging and aspiring and all those kind of things. Once you're part of that, it's really hard to think outside of the thinking of the collective. And sometimes this is referred to as groupthink and in a number of different ways. But it really becomes people take it to the extreme that we'll kill other people that don't agree with us or that are outside of our agreements and collective. But also these agreements are as simple as a stop sign. You don't have to stop at a stop sign. There's a law that says you do, and most people do for the most part, but maybe they sort of breeze through it. There are consequences for operating outside the agreements of the collective. So if you get caught, you'll get punished. All right. So and this is all just a part of human nature. This is so to change that, you need to disrupt the thinking of the collective. And in the collective, they're going to defend their points of view because that's what they learned. That's what they were told. That's what was written in the books. That was, this is how we operate. And this is how it is with wine and food. This is how it is with certain groups, specialty groups of wine industry and the wine industry as a whole versus wine consumers. We think we need to educate them so that they'll consume more wine. Well, how the hell did we come up with that cockamamie idea?
Don't know.
You know?
I want to ask you the same thing. How we come up with that idea? We need
Yeah.
to like instead of understanding, we need just educated them to be able to follow the rules. I don't understand that. I
And
don't get.
everybody's flip-flopping around because right now we are in a growing global crisis for the wine industry. So
Yes.
now everybody's throwing stuff out there with no plan, no roadmap for success. I've been doing work in China almost 30 years now, and going to China 30 years ago and seeing the wine culture then, seeing the entire country then, you go and it's totally unrecognizable. Villages have become high rises. They've moved people out of the farms and into cities and so forth. I love the culture. I love the cuisine. I love the people. I've got so many really good friends, and I'm heartbroken that I'm not going back anytime soon. But I also started when the bubble was being created in China. Everybody was so happy because so much wine was being sold there, but it wasn't building a culture of consumption or enjoyment of wine. It was
Mm.
building a bubble of pretense, of of face, of luxury goods, and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. and and in general, the Chinese, when we get to the phenotyping, are genetically and physiologically predisposed to not like dry wines, especially dry red wines.
And that's why they drink with Coca-Cola in the beginning.
Well, the fun, I have never seen with Coca-Cola, but red wine and Coca-Cola is the national drink of the Basque people of Spain and France. So we point, and this is part of the misunderstanding. We point, oh, they drink Coke, haha, red wine and Coke. No, the French and the Spanish, who have always mixed fruit juice or cassis or a cube of sugar and some water. We are so totally out of touch with the history and tradition that somehow we think the wine today is what was drunk by the French and whatever. And so in the past, so I had been predicting a bubble in China
Uh-huh.
of major magnitude because wine was for gifting and prestige, not for consuming. And
Exactly.
it became uh, the analogy I love. Wine became the fruitcake of China. It's something that became you give fruitcake to people at the holidays, but nobody likes fruitcake. So you say, "Oh, thanks very much," and you keep it. Then you give it to somebody else. You re-gift it, and
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
what's
wow.
been going on in China for decades now. Is
Yes.
re-gifting, not a culture of enjoyment in drinking,
It's so
because
true.
it's just crazy. So right now, in the past 5 years, wine consumption in China is down 65%, and production is plummeting at the same rate. Uh, what started the whole Chinese thing was 15 or 20 years ago. The government said we will become a nation of red wine drinkers, heart healthy, and it was really so that they could create an alcohol alternative to beer and Maotai and Baijiu and that stuff that used a lot of grain that they wanted to put back into the food supply chain. So that's why wine became popular. And now it's not supported by the government. It's crashing. That's over. What most people don't know is that France, Italy, and Spain, since my birth year, 1952,
Yeah.
wine consumption is down 85%.
Wow, 85% since
And you don't
62.
even know this, and it's
I
still
didn't know that.
plummeting. I know.
85.
It's because
Wow.
we're cheerleaders. Oh, everything's okay. It'll all be fine. Tell the stories, educate the consumers. It's all about terroir, whatever the hell that is. And we have
To
no
be
freaking
honest,
clue
I,
what's going
I speak
on in the world.
I speak with some business owners in the wine industry and then just ask them, what do you think will be the next for us, just to get a answer from them. And some of them just tell me like, it's okay because, when you're young, I didn't drink wine. So when they're getting older, they're going to drink wine. So they're just waiting for the magic pill or things changing without them moving ahead or doing
Right.
nothing. And it's insane when I answer this. It's I don't want it to disagree or become like a fight or becoming unpleasant. But I try to like a way to do to be like maybe rethinking about that, because if you don't do nothing today, how are we expecting different results tomorrow? It's a
Right.
harder thing, but that is how people lots of people still think in the industry.
Well, and so finally things are starting to turn down in the US, and it's very likely that that's going to happen more and more. The medical community is putting more and more pressure that any amount of alcohol is bad for you. The wine
Mm-hmm.
industry is totally unaware. The single uh, uh, most important factor for this crisis of consumption in France is rampant alcoholism. In the wine industries, oh, wine's the beverage of moderation, la da da, we're different and so on. But we're so blind that we're
This.
not responsible. And
Mhm.
when you become irresponsible, we are wide open targets for the anti-alcohol forces because of our ignorance and our
Mhm.
complete misunderstanding of the social effects and so on and so forth. And of
So
course, I'm a poster child for this because I haven't had a drink since 1992. I'm a recovering alcoholic for over 30 years now. So I don't drink. I don't read books and I don't drink. Everybody, well, how can you be a wine expert? I said, believe me, I've had plenty of wine, but my passion is now undoing all the BS, undoing all the problems we've created for ourselves that could
Mhm.
actually help us get back to a sustainable, healthy wine industry. And it's not going to be doing the same old stuff that we've been doing for the last 20, 30 years. So,
Yeah, it's a very good point, and it's very nice to be able to have you to bring that critical thinking or rethinking because it's you get the points from the beginning to know we're coming back to the traditional. They actually what everything started because sometimes we don't see that. Sometimes we don't see that. Like you said, we are blind, and then everything you said here is so true because we just tell ourselves, "Oh, China, great, consumption's up," but we don't really see things behind. We don't really stop it. Rethinking. All right,
right.
China. Wait a minute. Do you
And
know?
Australia is not doing all that well either. And so the question then becomes think of think of the global implications in dynamics. If the French lose China and lose 65% of their business in China, and if Spain, they don't have, remember, they don't have the consumption to support their industries.
Yeah.
And if Spain and if Chile and if Australia lose the Chinese market, where are those wines going to go?
And that's the thing. Is sometimes I feel the solutions people gave is it's a very like when I talk about these topics, like we have too much wine and we don't have consumption, and the only thing that people say is the same solutions, and everyone's wanted to do the same thing, like close the doors because we have too much wine. You just need to know like get a less wine on the table, and then we're gonna solve the problems. It's like very simple. And then all these families, all this business is gonna be go without any money, and then having no chance because it's insane because I don't want it to think like that. I don't want it to think we can't do it. Nothing. We just need to close
Right.
everything. I think the solutions we have today as well. What we're talking about the solutions is not or educate people. Let's make everyone drink wine. Let's get like a religion kind of thing here. We convert everyone to drink wine, and then we don't really understand the behind of the things. We don't really have that critical rethinking, and that's one of the things that really frustrate me. It's seeing everyone thinking and going on the same way, on the same path, where we have this such a huge opportunities around the crisis. But it's hurt me so much. I don't know how I explain to you like my frustration to see everyone thinking the same
Oh,
and then doing the same thing.
believe me, girl. I've been doing this since before you were born, you whippersnapper. Let me go back to my post MW crisis then, okay?
Mm, yeah.
Because that'll help get us there. All right, so now I've passed the Master of Wine examination. I'm in a totally dysfunctional alcoholic marriage. I get divorced. Um, I have been
You
taught
get
critical thinking. Huh?
just before you finish that, why most of the people are asking like about the wine kid actually going through this wine
Yeah.
master wine program. Most of the time like I got divorced.
Well, this was a divorce that that should have happened a long time ago. It took some critical thinking skills to go, what the hell am I doing here? So I get back to Behringer. I'm the new MW, you know. So I had my little bit of fame, but deep inside, you know, I was teaching wine and food. I'd been written up in the Financial Times in London. Jancis Robinson did like an entire page story in the Sunday Times, calling me the guru of wine and food pairing. All right. And people really need to understand, because if you look at what I'm doing now, it's not what I was doing then, but it was just the beginning of it. I knew that there were key interactions between wine and food. My brain doesn't think in the metaphorical descriptor system that's being too widely adopted now. You know, the way that you have to write about wines and describe, you know, smells and stuff like that. I've got an unbelievable knowledge of the history and traditions and culture of gastronomy around the world, and I knew in my heart of hearts something was really wrong with this whole wine and food pairing thing. And so I got back to Behringer. Oh, wait, I'm a master of wine. I can ask questions, and if anybody says, well, you're an idiot, that's fine. I've got the credential, you don't. Screw you. And so I got back, and we were having these programs at Behringer, and I sat down with a group of chefs, a number of people that were right at the table when I had my epiphany or my nervous breakdown, however you want to define it. And I said, okay, normally we would do the wine and food pairing, and I'd show you the classic, you know, pairings, and we'd taste, and then we'd argue, because I also know even top experts oftentimes have polar opinions about the quality of a wine. I've literally seen two MWs drinking wine at the same moment, one saying this is the greatest example of this in history, and the other saying this is commercially unacceptable quality. And then when you go to the wine and food and try and describe it, oh, and that's smooth and delicious. No, it's harsh and bitter. And why can't we all get along? And so I said, I want to see if we can distinguish what happens when you put wine and food together.
Yeah.
Not jump to the conclusion whether it's good or bad or right or wrong or this or that, but actually what's happening. So this was called the cause and effect of wine and food. We were trying to find a causality for a different effect. And this led me into areas of sensory and perceptual sciences and psychosensory, psychogustatory phenomenon, and all this cool shit. And I just went haywire. Scientists were talking about umami taste. I introduced the concept of umami to Western culture. And I was the Swami of umami. And people talking about the resistance of the collectives, and oh no, you know, you wouldn't believe the resistance, but science, you know, clearly has shown this is a fifth primary taste. And even today, people don't understand what umami is. They teach about it and don't know what it is.
They don't know. Yeah. I feel like that as well. I don't think people really understand what that.
When we get a chance, I'll give you MSG, which is so salty and umami, so you can't really distinguish it. But then you add prime nucleotides to it, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, what's that? That's umami. Take a mushroom, take a raw mushroom, and then one that you've put in the microwave for about 30 or 45 seconds, and it's soft. Taste the raw mushroom. Taste the cooked mushroom. There's something there, and that's glutamate, glutamic acid converted. That's primary umami taste. So,
Ah,
and it's in
okay.
fruits, it's in vegetables. And the interesting thing is, so what it boiled down to a couple simple things. When you have sweetness in the food, it causes something that's called sensory modulation. So modulation, right, is sort of a wave of up and down things. So when you have sweetness in the food, uh, take a sip of works best with more reactive wine, with a strong red wine. Take a sip of wine, eat a grape, take a sip of wine. It sucks. And yet, in all this wine and food pairing, oh, the cherries of the dish mirror the cherries you smell in the thing, even though you might not even smell cherries, but we make this shit up. And and actually, the cherries would actually make the wine suck. So
That's very interesting points.
so I started working with scientists. I started going to scientific conferences. I've got easily 50 mentors of high level sensory and perceptual scientists around the world. We found
Wow.
that something as simple as red wine and red meat, no basis for the pairing. It's the
That that's
salt
not
you
that's
put.
it's not basis for any of that. That's just a misunderstood for the whole population, the whole society, because they
Right?
never ask themselves
And
why.
we train people. So, anyways, so all this is going on, and now my newfound passion is
To break it down.
unraveling the mess that we've made, the mess we've made with history and tradition. I mean, in Larousse Gastronomique, it states unequivocally when the finest wines are served, or the finest dishes, serve the Lafitte, the Romanée, the Côte Rôtie, or if the guests prefer sweet wines, dry white wines. There was no wine and food pairing. We made all this crap up. And it's one of the worst marketing and sales initiative strategies that could ever have been instituted. Bad for business. It anyway. Um,
Because if you just limit people what they can eat with the drink they have, they
yeah,
probably it's gonna be limited what they
right. And
actually
if you don't like the right wine, something's wrong with you. So the collective is now sneering at you. What's wrong with you? You can't have
what's
that
wrong
wine.
with.
It'll ruin your life. You have to have me to guide you. It, here's here's the crux of it. Computing used to require knowing a special code. And to
Mm.
open a folder, you had to have C colon backslash back, this string of code. And then that would take you into a page of more code that you would have to, it wasn't friendly. You had to educate people how to use it. People hated it or loved it. And the ones who loved it used it as a sign of power and authority. So when the graphic user interface was introduced, GUI interface, it was, oh, look, here's a mouse. And what you see when you move it, it moves on the screen. And then you take the little arrow and you go to the folder, a little picture of a folder, click, click, the folder's open. Oh shit, no kidding. I'm computing. Look at me, I'm computing. If that
Yeah.
had never happened, where would computing be now? It would not be that that every household has 10 computers, let alone that their refrigerator's a computer and their microwave and washing machine and all this other shit. So, and this is where the wine industry is stymied by lack of true innovation, just doing the same old crap, louder, faster, bigger, whatever, and then wondering, why is it not working? And so, and
It's
this
so
is disruptive. This is the disruption that's going to be necessary for a difference to really be made for
and
our
I
wonderful
think
industry.
but I think the time is now, team. I think the time is now. I have a feeling the time is for us to do something because it's no point. Like business is really struggling. Things is going worse and worse and worse, and the crisis is just we need to just wake up and just
Yeah.
do it. And I don't think we have more options anymore. The options gone.
Terror and panic are great motivators, right? So,
we are, all the options are gone. We have absolutely nowhere to go if we not innovate the industry. So I think
but
the time
then
is
then we've got an industry oblivious to what's going on around the world too. So, it's like, oh, everything's okay, rah rah rah. Tell
um,
more stories, have pretty labels. Oh, it's low alcohol, it's no alcohol, it's high alcohol, more oak, less oak, buttery. No, don't do that. Sweet wines. Oh, you drink sweet wines. What's wrong with you? Oh, God, you can't have that with that food, you idiot. If, you
just spending so much
so,
time to criticize people. We criticize everyone. We just
oh,
spending
it's
so
horrible.
much time
It
criticize
is
each
so
other.
horrible.
What it don't really what's annoying me on industry at the moment, we instead to see ourselves or innovate ourselves or do something for ourselves, we just spend the most time criticizing us. You're criticizing someone else and someone's doing alcohol. Oh my God, did that person did non-alcoholic wine? Oh my God, this one's selling rosé for $100. Oh my God. Always we try to criticize people instead to look at ourselves as putting all better versions, doing better business, innovate, do something new. So instead to thinking about that, we prefer to spending time in putting our minds like, oh my God, what else? What this guy is doing? Oh my God, this is crazy. We spend so much time criticizing other people.
Yeah.
I think we're losing time with this so much in the industry. Because sometimes I just when people start to criticize each other, it's like, do you know what? I'm out. Don't need to be on this conversation
Yeah.
anymore. I don't
So,
need to criticize anyone. I mean,
so back
and
to my,
they have segments for everyone.
yeah.
They have different types of wine, different types of mentality, different types of phenotypes, different people. There is a space for everyone. We just needed to looking after ourselves instead to spend time criticize. But I wanted to answer the last question because it's over an hour now. My last questions for you, team. I wanted to you give me 3 advices from your heart to our industry to how they can do for really building the rethinking, that critical thinking about things they do now. Because I'm sure people wanted to do something different, but they sometimes don't know how or where to start, or sometimes the information is not easy available for like an easy way to find how to do this. I think like I said to you, we're keeping this the bubble where you're just going to work and come back home and we don't really have this time. But how people can do different tomorrow? So do you have 3 advices to guide us?
My 3 advices. Number 1, we need to ensure moving forward that there's at least as much focus on consumers and what drives consumers' preferences, attitudes, and behaviors. The wine industry is so product centric and has virtually no understanding of consumers. So inevitably, what happens is we push people away, we criticize the people, we make judgments about the wine, and then attach that judgment to the people who drink it. So if we don't like this large brand, or if this
Mm,
wine has some residual sugar, or if this wine this, those wines are stupid, those are horrible, and the people who drink those wines are stupid. And we just don't get that. And we really need to learn to embrace and to understand and cultivate all consumers. And sweet wines aren't a beginning point for millions of people. That's a destination. Quit telling people they're a beginner. My mother-in-law loves White Zinfandel. I started the Moscato craze with the research I did, and it was basically she's a PhD in economics. She's 87 years old, and you're going to tell her she's a novice and uneducated and unsophisticated. Shame on the wine industry for our attitudes and our total lack of focus and understanding of consumers. So that's Number one, we've got to understand consumers. Okay. The second part is we need to clean up an awful lot of the misinformation, the myths, the BS, including all this stuff we're doing with wine and food, and this cockamamie Carmen Miranda fruit spice descriptive language that we've come up when we don't even understand the difference between smell and taste, for God's sake. So,
Oh
so,
yeah. And then
so
for me,
number
it's so
two,
hard. It's hard to learn those things in a way.
we need to be here and provide education for people who want education, but we need to clean up the education system big time. And the second thing is the people who need the most education for the benefit of wine are the people in the wine industry and the influencers and in the wine community. Quit trying to tell people who are just enjoying wine that they've got to become educated. They've got to have something they don't like because of their food they're eating and all this crap. So with the re-education of the wine industry should take precedent over educating consumers. Keep doing it, but we've got to change a lot of that content because a lot of it is just plain wrong information. It's bad. Educating with bad data is not educating. Okay, so that's it.
I love that. I love
And
that.
number three is learning about perceptual individuality. My new passion has actually been for a decade now. Human beings don't experience reality. We interpret reality. Without a human perceptual system, there is no color, there is no table or mass, there's no sound. It's only when energy hits our sensory receptors that goes to transducers to go through neural pathways into our brain for processing, and 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 every one of us perceives things differently. There are many people where there's a great commonality of what we're interpreting as reality with colors and so on and so forth. But we talk about, oh, trust your own palate and people's palates are different. We have no idea what that means. That's just some false sense of a security around a meaningless cliche that nobody pays attention to anyways. So perceptual individuality is how human beings form all of their opinions and beliefs and their values. And the world's becoming there's a bigger issue around this also that could annihilate everybody on the face of the planet, let alone the wine, the little old wine industry. But learning to respect that some people have way different perception of the universe than another individual sitting right next to them. And you can only pretend, oh, I see what you mean, or I'm tasting the same thing or whatever. We're all different in this system. And this would give us a completely new path forward for market segmentation. For instead of saying, oh, the millennials are this, no, millennials just an age, a very vague and meaningless age demographic. There are people that are millennials that want vastly different things, but we don't know how to target and to personalize and customize experiences for people. We are incapable of it. And so that's the third thing.
I I don't know how to say thank you so much because you just did. I'm being with a brain. Keep always when talking to you, it seems like I'm read a book. Like I end up with feel like it's so fresh and inspired to be able to share, because I share the same critical thinking as you do, and then always you challenge me even further, and that is why I love so much our conversations. Is one of the reason I wanted to share this conversation with the world, and that's my reason to invite you in this podcast. It's because your brain is just fantastic. I don't know how you do, how you training. It would be lovely
Well,
to know how you get.
it's a scary place to go sometimes. It's not always functional, but and again, early on, I said I taught, my brain is different, and when people are doing things, I'm often going, how do they do? How do you read a book?
You
Seriously.
get such a very good visions about the industry, and then I'm sure this is pretty new for lots of us because this is it's information is still limited. I wish we can do something to expand in that knowledge to go further, and that's why this podcast is about it. But yeah, I would say thank you. I really feel like inspired to write like another 10 posts on the LinkedIn after this conversation. So thank you so much
Thanks,
because
Priscilla.
you're
And
such a
I want to
you're
acknowledge you in what you're doing and the courage that it takes to stand up and say, wait a minute, I don't get this. I don't know why we're doing this. And that's what we need to inspire others to do. That's why I'm so inspired by you. I'm not the future of the industry. I'm the kind of the
the
past.
guy, you're the
I'm
guide of
the
us.
maybe the wisdom, having had the experiences, knowing how full of BS we are about what we think about the history and culture and traditions. And we need to think differently going forward. And we need people like you and millions more that are stepping forward and that'll go up to sweet wine drinkers and saying, you know what? The wine industry needs to apologize for you. We are so freaking stupid. And the sweet wine drinkers will go, I know. That's why I'm drinking cocktails. That's why I'm abandoning wine because you
Yeah,
guys are a bunch of idiots, and and you're not doing me a service. You've got some greater agenda for all this crap. So thank
yeah.
you for the work you doing and the courage it takes to step out. It's inspiring for me.
Yeah, and inspired for me. Like, thanks so much for the guide and to challenging me even further and to making me thinking and rethinking about things that didn't come across in my mind. It just automatically. I really appreciate what you do. I'm your big fan, and I'm so glad that we building community. We're building each other to be able to make this information go further and we actually make something for the world and then we have a better future of the wine industry. I was
Yeah.
just very grateful to have you in this podcast. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, darling. See you soon and look forward to
You
lots
too.
of adventures together. Thanks.